quick demo of this video tutorial. This is a step-by-step Angular 7 tutorial to implement CRUD operations, insert, update and delete in ASP.NET Web API. Here is the final output of the tutorial. All of the operations are implemented on the basis of employee details like full name, position, employee code and mobile. Now let me show you how to add a new employee. If you submit the form, here we have the new employee record. In order to update the record, you can select the row so that corresponding employee details will be populated inside the form. Now let's update the employee. After all, submit the form. So here we have updated corresponding employee record. If you want to delete the record, you can click on this button here. Then it will ask for confirmation. Click on OK. So here we have deleted corresponding employee. I am sure you will find this from scratch project development helpful for your upcoming Angular 7 projects. So please watch till the end of this video tutorial. Before starting this video, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notification about my new videos. Most of the video lesson here also has a written blog post. You can find the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. What's up YouTube? Welcome to CodAffection. This is an Angular 7 tutorial to implement CRUD operations, insert, update and delete with Web API. We have already implemented Angular Web API CRUD operation, but it was in Angular 4. After that, we have lot of updates in Angular. Finally, we have Angular 7. So some of the previous project methods were not working with latest updates. Besides that, edit operation from previous project was not working for some of us. So I decided to update the project with latest Angular 7. So without further ado, let's get started. So here is my Visual Studio 2017. First of all, we will create the Web API project. After that, we will create the Angular 7 project. In order to create ASP.NET Web API project, go to File, then New, then Project, or you can use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+N. From left panel, select Web under Visual C#, then choose this option here, ASP.NET Web Application from .NET Framework. Name the project here. I will name it as Web API. Then here, select the location where you want to save this project. Then click on OK. Select Web API, keep other options as it is. Click on OK. So here we have the brand new ASP.NET Web API project. Before continuing with this project, let's set up a database. So here is my management studio. Now let's create a database. In this project, we are going to deal with employee details. So I will name this database as employee.db. Click on OK. Newly created database can be seen inside this node here. So here it is. Inside that, we have to create a table. First of all, we have the primary key employee ID. It is of the type integer. After that, we have full name, which is of the type varchar50. And then we have emp code for employee code. It will be of the type varchar20 or something. And then we have mobile, which is of the type varchar50. Finally, we have position, which is of the type varchar50. I want to make this employee ID as the primary key. Also, I want to make the same column as an identity specification for the table. So select the column, then go to column properties. Then expand this identity specification here, set is identity as yes. So inside this employee column, we don't want to insert any value. SQL Server will take care of that. It will start from 1 and incremented by 1 upon new record insertion. And thereby it will maintain its unique constraint. Now let's save this table. In Management Studio, you can use the shortcut Ctrl+S, or you can click on this save icon here. I will name this table as employee. Newly created tables can be seen under this tables node here. Now we want to add entity model for this SQL Server table employee into this Web API project here. For that, right click on models, add new item, select data from the left panel, then select ADO.NET entity data model. I will name it as DB models. Click on add, then select entity framework designer from database. Click on next, click on new connection. Inside this connection property window, we have to provide the details in order to connect this new database employee DB. So first of all, here we have to provide the SQL Server instance name. For me, it is local /SQL Express. Then select the database from this drop down here, employee DB. Click on OK. After creating this entity model inside this folder, there will be a class with this name. In order to interact with the DB, we have to create an object of this class here. I want to change this class name here. I will set it as DB model. Click on next. If you have installed more than one version of entity framework like me, you have to select one of them. I will select the latest version. Click on next. Here we have to select the database objects that we need to add inside this entity model. Employee. Now click on finish. Now inside this models folder, you can see the newly created dbmodels.edmx file. Here we have the corresponding diagrammatic representation of employee table. Inside this entity model, you can see this file employee.cs. Here we have the class employee. Inside that we have properties corresponding to these columns here. So we will be using this employee class as a model for this Web API project. Now let's create employee controller. Before that, we have to rebuild this solution. Now let's create the controller. Right click on this folder, add controller. I will select this template here, Web API 2 controller with actions using entity framework. Click on add, then select the model class. I will select the employee class here, then select the data context class, which is here DB model. We have named this class while creating the entity framework. Then I will name this controller as employee controller. Click on add. So here we have the employee controller. As a result of ASP.NET scaffolding mechanism, here we have the Web API methods get, post, put and delete in order to implement the CRUD operations. First of all, we have created an object of DB model class as DB here. Here we have the first Web API method get employees, which is of the type get. So using this method, we can retrieve all the employees record from this employee table. For that, we just need to return this employees collection from DB object. After that, we have one more web method, which is to return a selected employee for given employee ID. We don't need this method for this project, so I will get rid of this method. And then here we have the put employee method, which is to update an existing employee. Here we have the parameters, ID of the employee, and here we have the object containing new details of employee. First of all, we will check whether the model is valid or not. We don't have to do that here. We will do the validations inside the Angular 7 project. So I will remove this from here. Here we have the if clause to check whether this ID and ID inside this object are matching or not. If they are not matching, we will return this bad request. If IDs from these two parameters are matching, we will set this state as modified, and finally we just need to call this save changes method from entity framework. And here we have the catch block. Inside that, first of all, we will check whether the given ID is existing or not. If there is no employee with given ID, we will return not found. Otherwise, we will throw the exception. And finally, we will return the status code as no content if everything goes well. After that, we have the post method. Inside that, we will insert a new employee record. Here we have the employee object containing details of new employee. First of all, we will check the validation. We don't need to do that here. We will do that inside the Angular 7 project. First of all, we will add this object into employees collection, and we just need to call this save changes method. As a response, we will return the object containing details of new employee with new employee ID. Finally, we have this delete WebAPI method with a single parameter ID. First, therefore, we will store the corresponding employee by calling this find function using this ID parameter. If there is no employee with given ID, we will return this not found. Otherwise, we will call this remove function, and we just need to call this save changes method. Here you can see the employee exists method, which we have used inside this put function here in order to check whether the given ID is existing or not. Finally, we have this dispose method here, which is overridden from this parent class here, API controller. The main purpose of this dispose method is to release resources that we have used inside this employee controller. Inside this controller, we have created an object of DB context class as DB, so we have to release that class. For that, we will call this dispose method. Finally, we just need to call this dispose method from parent to do the rest. So here we have done with WebAPI part. Now let's create an Angular 7 project. For Angular application development, I will be using Visual Studio Code Editor. You can use the same Visual Studio itself, but I would like to work with them side by side. First of all, we want to open the folder where we want to create the Angular project. So click on Open Folder here. Then locate the targeted folder. I want to save the Angular app inside this project folder where we already created the WebAPI project. Click on Select Folder. For creating Angular application, we have to run Angular CLI commands. For that, you can use default command prompt, or you can use the integrated terminal from this IDE. So here we have the corresponding Angular CLI command, ng new, then application name. I will name this application as Angular 7, then hit enter. Would you like to add Angular routing? No. Which style sheet format would you like to use? I will stick with CSS. As a result of command execution, we have already created the project folder Angular 7. Currently, it is installing some default packages into the project. It will take some time, so please be patient. So here we have the brand new Angular 7 project. Now let's run this application. For that, first of all, we have to navigate inside the project folder, which is Angular 7. Then run this command ng serve, then --open, or in short, we have to provide O. Now hit enter. It will compile this application and open in our default web browser. So this is how the fresh Angular 7 project looks like. Along with this, let me run the WebAPI from Visual Studio. You can run this application in debug mode using this run icon here. I don't want to do that. Instead, I will run this application without debug mode. So right click here, view, then view in browser. So here we have the WebAPI project. During the development of this Angular 7 project, we have to consume or call WebAPI methods that we have added inside this employee controller here, which is of the type HTTP, put, get, or post, whatever. We have to consume that from this Angular 7 project. But there is a problem, which is CORS, cross origin resource sharing. That means this WebAPI project will block requests from another application which is hosted in a different domain or different port number, like in this case. In this case, both of these applications are running from different port numbers. So we have to bypass this CORS, or we have to enable CORS inside this WebAPI project. So let's look how to enable CORS inside this WebAPI project. For that, select the WebAPI project, then go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, then Package Manager Console. Here we have to install NuGet package WebAPI.Cors. For that, you have to execute this command here, install package Microsoft.AspNet.WebApi.Cors. Don't worry, I have given this command in video description. You can copy paste from there. Now hit enter. So here we have successfully installed the package. Now let me build this solution again. After that, reload this page. If you are still able to see the home page, the installation of the package is successful. For some of you, there might be some problem with version compatibility, especially if you are working with .NET framework which is older than mine. So in that case, you have to run these two commands. First of all, we have to reinstall the Web API. Then we have to install this WebApi.Core package. I have given these two commands in video description. If you have any problem with version compatibility, you can run these two commands. After that, everything should work as expected. Now let's configure the WebApi.Cors package. For that, inside this app start folder, we have this file webapi.config.cs file. Then inside this register function, we can do this. We have to enable Cors package. Here we just need to do this. config.enableCors function can be called. Inside that, we have to pass an object of enableCors attribute class. In order to use this class, we have to use this namespace system.web.http.cors. As a first parameter to this attribute class constructor, we have to provide the Angular application URL. So let me copy this, then paste here. Make sure to remove this / at the end of URL. As a second parameter, we have to provide the headers. Here we will allow all the available headers. Finally, we have the supported methods. For this, we will allow all of the Web API methods. So this line here will allow requests from port number 4200 to consume methods from this Web API project. Let me save this, then build this project again. After that, back to the Angular project. Now let's continue with this Angular 7 project development. Before that, let me show you the structure of this application. For that, I will create a new file here. I will name this file as appstructure.txt and I will paste the structure here. So inside this application, we have the parent component employees. It has two child components, employee and employee list. Inside this employee component, we will deal with form for insert and update operation. Inside this employee list, we will list all of the inserted records. And here we have the shared folder. Inside that, we have the employee service class, and here we have the employee model class. Now let's create these files inside the project. So let me open one more terminal here. First of all, navigate inside the project folder. First of all, let's create this employees component. For that, we can do this g4 generate c4 component, and we have to create employees component. So here we created the component employees. Newly created component can be seen inside this app folder here, employees. Now we have to create these child components. For that, you can use the same command with few modifications. We have to create the child components employee and employee list inside this employees folder. So employees /employee, hit enter. After that, we have employees /employee list. So here we have created required components employees and child components employee and employee list. Now we have to create these service and model class inside the shared folder. So let's look how to create them. For that, we can do this g4 generate s4 service. We have to create the service class inside the shared folder. So shared / we have to create employee service class. So we just need to provide employee here. If there is no folder with this shared name, it will create the folder shared. Inside that, it will create this employee service class. Now hit enter. Here you can see the newly created shared folder. Inside that, we have the employee service class files. Now we have to create this model class. Unfortunately, there is no Angular CLI command to create model classes. Even though we have some tweaks here, g4 generate, and we have to create a class. In short, we can use CL here, and we have to create that inside the shared folder. And here we have the name of the class as employee. So this will create a file employee.ts inside this shared folder. But that is not what we want. We have to name the file like this. This is the recommended way to name model classes in Angular: employee.model.ts. In order to do that, we have to add this flag here, type is equal to model. Hit enter. So here we have created the model class file employee.model.ts. For this application development, I will be using Bootstrap. So go to the official website getbootstrap.com. At the time of this recording, we have the latest version 4.1.3. Now click on get started. We have to use this style sheet and JavaScript reference inside the project. So let me copy this CSS reference, then back to the application, open index.html. Inside this index.html, we have the HTML declaration and we have head and body wrapper for rest of the components. All of the component HTML will be shown inside this body tag here. So we can add the Bootstrap reference inside this index.html. For style sheet, I will add the reference just before the head end tag, and we need to copy the corresponding JavaScript reference. We can paste that just before this body end tag. Inside an Angular application, default component will be app component. So here we have the corresponding TypeScript file and here we have the corresponding HTML. Here you can see the component selector that you can see inside this body tag here, app root. This much code inside this app component HTML is responsible for this default view of the application. Now let's customize this application as per our requirement. Let me get rid of this default text here. While developing this application, I will be using emmet abbreviations. For example, if we need a div with some class 1, we can do this div.class1, then hit tab. If you want to have more than one class for a div, we can do this div.class1, then .class2, then hit tab. So here we have the div with class 1 and class 2. Now suppose if you want to add an unordered list, we can do this. We have ul, inside that we need li element 3 times, so we can do this li multiplies 3. Inside that we need a label with class something form hyphen control. So this is what we need to type, then hit tab. So here we have the ul, inside that we have 3 li elements. Each of them has this label with class form control. So in this way, emmet abbreviations helps us to add HTML controls with few shortcuts. So we can save the time during application design. So let's get started. Let me get rid of this text here. In Bootstrap, first of all, we will have a div with class container. Inside that, we have to show the parent employees component. So go to the corresponding TypeScript file here, which is employees component. Now we just need to add the corresponding component selector tag inside this div here. So just paste the selector here. In order to add a tag for this selector, retype the last character, which is yes here, backspace yes, then hit tab. Now let's go to employees component HTML. Inside that, first of all, I need a div with class Jumbotron, which is also from Bootstrap. Then we need a heading for the application, which is h1 with class display4, which is also from Bootstrap. And we need to center the text inside this heading. So text hyphen center. I will name this application as employee register. After that, we need a line separation, so HR element can be added. After that, we need to add the grid system from Bootstrap. So we have the div with class row, and inside that we have the first div with class called empty5. Like this, we need one more column. So let me copy this and pasting below that. And this one will take the 7 grid. Inside this first column, I want to show this component employee component. So we have to add the corresponding component selector tag here. So first of all, we have the module app, which is the default module in an Angular application. And we have the component name employee. Hit tag. So this must be the selector for the component. Let me check that here. App-employee, that's it. Now inside this second column here, we need to add the employee list component. So app-employee-list. If you want to check that, you can do that. App-employee-list. For this application, I have some custom CSS rules. I will paste that inside the global style sheet, which is here, styles.css. Custom CSS rules for this application. I think we don't need to explain any of these. Some of them we will discuss during the validation of the form. Okay, let me save all of these modifications here. For that, you can go to file, then click on save, or you can use the shortcut Control KS. It's not like pressing K and S while holding Control. Instead, hold Control, then press K, release Control, then press yes. Okay, so it will save all of the files with a single shortcut, or you can use this menu here, save all. So this is how the application looks like. Here we have the employee component, and here we have the employee list component. Inside this, we will show a form for insert and update operation. Inside this, we will have a table to list all of the inserted records from the employee table. First of all, let's design the form. For that, we will start with the model class, employee model class here. Here we have to add properties related to the employee that we have already generated inside this ASP.NET.WebApi project as a result of entity model creation. Here we have the employee.cs. We will have these same properties inside Angular project. So let me copy this and pasting here. Obviously, C# and TypeScript has different syntax. So we have to adjust that here. Now we have the employee model class with required properties. Now we have to create the form inside this employee component.html using this model class here. Normally we will create an object of this employee model class inside this TypeScript file here, and we will use that inside this HTML here. But in this application, mainly we will work with these two child components, employee and employee list. So we need a way to communicate or interact between these two components, employee and employee list. So far, the best way to communicate multiple Angular components is to share same instance of service. For example, inside this application, we have the employee service class, and we will inject this employee service class inside this app module.ts file, and that injected instance can be accessed from this employee and employee list component here. So inside this service class, we will have properties which is to be shared among multiple components. For example, from this form component employee, we will add new employee record. At the same moment, we have to update the employee list inside this employee list component. That can be done by adding the list property inside this service class. So first of all, inside this service class here, I will create an object of this model class employee. Property will be something like this, form data, which is of the type employee class. Here you can see the red squiggly line because of the absence of the corresponding class import statement at the top. While entering this class name here, we have the autocomplete where we have shown the employee. If you click on this here, it will add the corresponding class import statement at the top. Otherwise, paste the cursor here, then hold Control, then press period or dot, and click on this import statement here. So here we have the form data property. Using this property, we will design the form inside this employee component. For that, first of all, we have to inject this employee service class inside app module.ts. For that, we just need to add the employee service class inside the providers list of the app module.ts file, employee service. Click on this so that it will add the corresponding class import statement at the top. So here we have injected employee service class inside app module.ts file. Now in order to use the same instance inside this employee component TypeScript file, we will create a property here, private service, which is of the type employee service class. Now let's design the form inside the corresponding HTML file here. Instead of this default text here, we need a form. We don't need this action attribute. Instead, I will add a local reference form, which is equal to ngForm from Angular. ngForm. Now let's add form controls. For that, first of all, we have the div with class form group. Inside that, we will have the label. We don't need this for attribute, and this will be for full name. After that, we have the input text box, input with class form control from Bootstrap. We don't need this type attribute. By default, input controls will have the type text, so I will remove this attribute. We are going to design this application using template driven approach. So first of all, we have to name this control full name, and we will be binding this input control to this employee property full name using two-way data binding. First of all, we have the square bracket. Inside that, we have the bracket ng model is equal to. So inside this component, we have the service class object service. So we can do this service. Inside that, we have the property form data. Okay. So form data. Inside that, we have the property full name. Okay. Copy and paste here. Along with this, don't forget to add the local reference for the input control. So here it is, pound symbol, then full name, which is equal to ng model. Like this label text box pair for full name, we have three more properties: employee code, position, and mobile. So let me copy this and pasting below that. This is for position. So here we need the position. So position. So according to that, we have to change the property values here. Position. We have two more properties left. I want to show them in a single line. Each of them will take half width. In Bootstrap, we can do this. Div with class form row. Inside that, we can add the div. So let me copy this, pasting below that 2 times. So this div here will take the half grid column. So call md6. We'll add the same class for this div also, and this is for employee code. So here also we have to change the attribute values according to the properties. So after all, we need a submit button. So we have the div with class form control. Inside that, we need a button of the type submit. So we can type this here, colon submit, with classes from Bootstrap, btn. So this submit button should be larger than from its default size. So we can add this additional class btn-lg. I want to fill this button inside this outer div, so we can add this class btn block. Hit tab. Text inside this button will be submit. In order to work this template driven approach, we have to add corresponding module inside app-module.ts file here, which is forms module. Okay, so I will add the import statement directly from Angular forms module. So we have to add the forms module class inside this. Let me save all of these modifications. Back to the application. Boom. So here we have the form for insert and update operation. Something is fishy because we have this extra div container here. Back to the HTML. So that's it. This container div for submit button should have the class form group. And we want to move this div outside this form draw div. So let me cut this and paste outside the div. Save. Back to the application. Now let me show you one thing. If I try to submit this form with sample data, submit, then if I try to fill this form again, you can see these predictions from previous posted form data. For me, which is really annoying in some cases, so I want to get rid of this default behavior of HTML form. For that, we just need to do this. We will add this property autocomplete and we will set it as off. Okay. Now if you inspect this application, you can see few errors inside the console window here. It says cannot read property full name of undefined. That is because of this form data property inside this service class. We have declared the variable here, but we have not yet initialized this property. That we can do inside the component TypeScript file here, employee component.ts. For that, I will define a new function here, reset form, with a single parameter form. It will be of the type ngForm. Click on this, it will add the corresponding import statement here. In order to reset a form, first of all, we have to call reset form function from ngForm object. After that, we have to initialize this form data property here. For that, we can do this dot service dot form data is equal to, here we will assign a new object. First of all, we have employee ID. I will set it as null. Then we have full name. It will be an empty string. Let me copy this and pasting below that 3 times. Here we have position, employee code, and mobile. Now we have to call this reset form function inside this ngOnIt lifecycle hook. So we can do this dot reset form function can be called. In some cases like this, we don't have a value for this form parameter. So I want to make this parameter as nullable, and inside that I will add this if clause. If this form object is not null, then only we have to call this reset form function. Now let me save this, then back to the application. So we don't have any console error. Now before submitting this form, I want to show you how to implement validation inside this form. I just want to make this full name text box as mandatory. So we just need to add this required attribute for this input control here. Required. Let me save this, back to the application here. Now let me show you a few things here. I want to inspect this input control. Now if you check the class applied for this input control, we have few classes which starts with ng, like ngPristine, ngValid, and ngTouched. These classes are managed by Angular itself. ngPristine means this input control is not changed from its default value. That means after showing this form value is not changed. Ng invalid means this input control is not valid because we have added required attribute for this input control. Currently it does not have any value, so this input control is not valid. And final class is ngText. Now if I enter random text inside this text box, then click outside, here you can see that ng classes are updated. Ng pristine is replaced with ng dirty, means default value is changed. Ng invalid is replaced with ng valid, means this control is valid. If you focus the control, then focus out from the control, ng untouched will be replaced with ng touched. Okay, now if I clear this text box, then click outside, we have these classes here, ng dirty, ng touched, and ng invalid. So here we have the red border around the text box indicating there is a validation error. This CSS rule is applied inside this styles.css here. If there is an input control with these two classes, ng dirty and ng invalid, we will apply this red border color. Now suppose if you want to show a validation error message just below this input control, we can do this. Just below this input control, we will add a div with class validation error. This is a custom class that we have added inside the styles.css. Inside that, we will show this error message, this field is required. Save, then back to the application. We only want to show this validation error when we have an input validation related to this full name control. So we have to hide and show this div based on a condition. For that, we can use this ngif directive, and here we have the condition. If full name text box is invalid and it is touched, in those cases we will show this error message. Let me save this, back to the application, click inside the full name text box, then click outside. We have only shown this validation error message, not the red border. It is because of the different condition here. Here we have dirty and invalid. Inside this ngif we have invalid and touched. So I want to use this same condition inside this styles.css. Instead of ng dirty, I will use ng touched. Save, back to the application, click inside, click outside. So here we have the validation error message. If I enter some random text inside that, text box is valid. If I reset the control, then back, so here we have the validation error message. Finally, I want to do one more thing. If the form as a whole is not valid, I want to disable this submit button. So back to the form, then I will add this disabled attribute here. Disabled. If the form is not valid, we will apply this disabled attribute, form.invalid. Save, back to the application. Initially you can see that the submit button is disabled, so that is why we have a blurred submit button here. If I enter something inside that, we have enabled this submit button. So here we have done a simple validation. Now let's look how we can submit the form, and thereby we can post this form data into the web API from Angular project. For that, we just need to add the submit event here. We will call this onSubmit function. Inside that, we just need to pass the form local reference. Now let's define this function inside the TypeScript file here. On submit with a single parameter form, which is of the type ngForm. In order to insert a new record, I will define a new function here, insert record, with a single parameter form, which is same as that of this function here. Let me copy this and pasting here. Now we just need to call this function here, this dot insert record. Into that we will pass this form parameter. In order to post this form data, I will define a new function inside the service class here. So function will be something like this: post employee. For this function we have a single parameter form data, which is of the type employee model class. Now from this function we have to consume this web API method here, post employee. Here we have the corresponding URI for the web method. Now let's look how to make the HTTP post request from this employee service class. For that we can use HTTP client class. In previous project we were using HTTP class. Instead HTTP client will be better. So first of all I will add the import statement here from Angular common HTTP, and here we have to import HTTP client class. Now inside this constructor we have to create a private property, private HTTP. It's of the type HTTP client class. Now let's make the HTTP post request. This dot HTTP dot post function can be called. As a first parameter we have to pass the URI for this web method here. Okay, as you can see here we are running web API method inside this port number. So let me copy this URI. I'm going to store that base address inside a separate variable here. It will be a read-only variable, root URL. Into this root URL I will add this suffix API, because this suffix is present in all of these web API method here. So it would be better to add that inside this variable here, API. Now we have to provide the URI for this web method post method here. So we just need to do this dot root URL. Into that we have to concat the employee here. As a second parameter we have to pass this employee object containing details of new employee, so that we can pass from this form data. So this post request will return an observer. So from this function we will return that observer, and we can call this function inside the component, employee component here. This dot service dot post employee function can be called. Into that we have to pass the new employee details that we can retrieve from this parameter here, form dot value. This post employee function will return an observer, so we can subscribe to that observer here. Inside that we have the arrow function with a single parameter response. For now inside this function I will reset the form. So we can call this reset form function. Into that we have to pass this form object. Now in order to use this HTTP client class we have to add corresponding module inside app.module.ts file here. For that I will copy this import statement from here and paste here. Instead of HTTP client we have HTTP client module. Now we have to add that inside this imports array here. Let me save all of these modifications and back to the application. Now let's try to insert a new employee record. Now let's submit the form. That's it. Since form is reset to its initial stage, the record must be inserted successfully. Let me check that inside this SQL Server table here. Right click on this table, then select top 1000 rows. So here we have the corresponding employee record for Gina Janes. After any of the CRUD operations, insert, update or delete, I want to show a notification message saying operation is successful. So for that we will be using an npm package. So go to the website npmjs.com, Now let's look for the package ngx toaster. So this is it. In order to install this package, let me copy this npm command, then back to the IDE here, open one more terminal, then navigate inside the project folder. I will paste the command here, hit enter. Installation of the package is successful. Now back to the npm page here. Along with this ngx toaster, we need Angular animations. In latest versions of Angular, it should be there by default. You can check that inside this package.json file here. There should be a package animations, Angular animations. So we don't need to install this package again. Now we have to add corresponding modules inside app-module.ts file. So let me copy these two import statements from here. Then back to the application, open app-module.ts file. And I will paste those import statements here. First of all, we have browser animations module. Let's add that into this. After that, we have toaster module. Toaster module.for root function is to be called. For this package, we have this style sheet toaster.css. It should be there inside node modules ngx toaster. Now we have to add this reference inside this angular.json file. There should be an array for styles. So I will find that here. So here it is. Along with this global style sheet styles.css, we can add the reference for this toaster style sheet also. Now in order to use this package inside employee component here, first of all we have to create an object of the toaster service class inside the constructor, private toaster. It should be of the type toaster service class. Now in order to make a success or green message for insert operation, we just need to do this dot toaster dot success function can be called. As a first parameter, we have the message inserted successfully. As a second parameter, we can pass a title for this notification. I will set it as the application name EMP register. Now let's look how this notification works. Before that, save all of the modification that we have made. Since we have made modification outside this src folder, that is inside this angular.json file, we have to restart the server. So back to the first terminal. In order to stop this server, we can use the shortcut Ctrl+C, then type Y, hit enter, then use the same command ngserve:\o. Now let me insert one more employee here. Now submit the form. So here we have the notification inserted successfully. If I execute this select statement for the same table, here we have the new employee Fiona Green. Now let's look how to list all of these employees inside this employee list component here. First of all, inside this service class, I will declare a new property here, list. It is an array of employee model class, employee. In order to retrieve all of the inserted employees, we can call this web API method here, get employees. So let's make the get request here. I will define the function refresh list. Inside that we can make the get request. This dot http dot get function can be called. As a first parameter, we have to pass the URI for this web method. API/employee. It is same as that of this post web method here. So I will copy this URI from here and pasting here. As you can see here, this get function returns an observer. So in order to make the HTTP request, we just need to call this toPromise function. Now let's call then function. Inside that we have the callback function with a single parameter response. Inside this response, we will have a collection of employees returned from the web API method. So here we just need to store that inside the list property here. This dot list is equal to response. Also, we have to cast this as an employee array here. Now using this list property, we can define employee list here. So open corresponding TypeScript file. First of all, inside the constructor, we have to make a property of the service class. Service, it's of the type employee service class. Now inside this ng on a lifecycle hook, we can call this refresh list function. So here it is. This dot service dot refresh list function can be called. So thereby we have retrieved employee collection into this list property here. Now using this property, we can design this component HTML. So here we have the corresponding HTML. So here we need a table with class table from Bootstrap. Also we need this class table hover from Bootstrap. Now hit tab. Inside the table, we will have the tr element. Here we are going to repeat this tr element as much as employees that we have inside this list property here. For that, we will use the directive ngif from Angular. So here it is, ngif is equal to let emp of service.list property. That means here we are going to iterate through this list property from service class. On each iteration, current employee object will be saved inside this emp property. Now using the emp property, we can add td cell here. First of all, I want to show the employee code. For that, I will use the string interpolation from Angular. So we have to use two pair of curly braces. Inside that we have the property emp.empcode. Along with that, I want to show the full name of the employee. So I will copy this and pasting after that. We need to show the full name of the employee. I want to separate them with an hyphen. Also, I want to enclose this employee code inside a pair of square brackets here. Now let's add remaining properties of employee. Let me copy this string interpolation here. Then make the required changes here. Instead of full name, we have position here. Like this, we need one more column for mobile. I want to add one more cell for delete button. So here we have the button with classes from Bootstrap btn, then btn-sm. It will make the button little small. For this button, I want to apply a red border, so we can add this class btn-outer danger. Inside the button, we need a close icon. So instead, I will use the capital X. Instead of outer, we have outline. Let me save all of these modifications. Then back to the application here. Boom. Here we have retrieved all the employees from the web API method and listed inside an HTML table. Next, we have to implement edit or update operation. For that, user will click on this row here, so we can populate the corresponding employee details inside the left form here. After making required changes, user can submit the form, and thereby we have to update the corresponding employee details. So let's look how we can do that. For that, we can add the click event here. When we click on this td element, we will call another function populate form. Into that function, we have to pass this employee object emp. Now I want to add the same click event for the rest of td elements except the last one, which is for delete operation. Now let's define the function populate form. Here we have the function populate form. Inside that we have a single parameter emp, which is of the type employee class. Inside this function, we just need to update this form data property with corresponding employee details, so that it will update the form here with corresponding employee details. So we will do this dot service dot form data is equal to emp. Save all of these modifications. Back to the application here. Now click on the first employee record. So inside the form we have populated corresponding employee details. We will do the update operation inside the same form submit event that we have already implemented inside employee component on submit function. Now we need to implement update operation also. For that, inside this component HTML form here, we have not yet added employee ID, which is needed for the update operation. So I will add the input hidden field here, input hidden. For this control also we have to add name, local reference and two-way data binding. So let me copy this and pasting here. Now let's make the required changes. Employee ID. Now inside this component TypeScript file, initially we have set this employee ID as null. So during the insert operation, this employee ID will be null. So based on that, we can decide whether we have an insert or update operation here. So we have the if clause. Inside that we will check the value of employee ID. Form dot value employee ID. If it is equal to null, we will do the insert operation. Otherwise, we will do the update operation here. So I will create one more function for update operation here. Update record. For that, we have to create a separate function inside the service class here. It will be same as that of this post employee. Let me copy this and pasting below that. I will name this function as put employee. From this put employee function, we have to call this web API method put employee, which has this URI here. As a first parameter, we have to pass this ID here. So it will be treated as this parameter value ID, which we have defined inside this webconfig.cs file here. If we pass a value after the controller name, it will be treated as the value of ID parameter from the web method. So for this put employee web method, we can pass the value of ID inside the URI itself. So I want to add the ID here. For that, I will concat the value here. Form data employee ID can be passed here. As a second parameter, we have to pass an object of employee with updated employee details. Okay, so instead of this post function, we have to call put function here. Same as that of post function, it returns an observer, and we have returned that observer from this function. So here we can subscribe to that function here. So we will call the function here. This dot service dot put employee function can be called. Form dot value can be passed. This function returns an observer, so we can subscribe to that. For now, I will just copy this subscribe function from here and pasting here. Inside this toaster message, I will show updated successfully. So this is what we can do for update operation. Now let's call this function inside this else block here. This dot update record, into that we have to pass the form parameter. After insert or update operation, we have to update this list property here. So we have to call this refresh list function. This dot service dot refresh list function can be called. We have to call the same function inside this update function also. Let me save all of these modifications. Back to the application here. I want to update this employee record. So select the record. Now if I try to update this employee details here, at the same time employee name is updated inside the list. That is not what we want. It is because of the assignment inside this list component here. Here we are just passing the reference of this object into this form data. So whatever changes made inside this form data will be reflected inside this EMP object. So that is why we have updated this full name here. Instead of this direct assignment, I will make a copy of the object then assign into the form data property. So we can do this. Object dot assign function can be called. As a first parameter, we have to pass the target. We don't have a target. Target is here in the left side assignment. Then we can pass the EMP object here. Save, then back to the application. Select the employee. If I update this employee name here, it won't be updated in the list. Now to make sure update operation is working for every field inside this form, this is what I do. I will add this suffix start to every element here. Then click on the submit. So here we have updated the employee and it is working for every field. Now for update operation, we have called same success function from the toaster service. It will give a green color, but for update operation, I want to use some different function, which is warning. Now finally, we have to implement the delete operation. For that, user want to click on this delete icon here, then we will delete the corresponding employee record. That we can do inside the list component here. First of all, I will add a click event for this button here. So let me copy this and pasting here. We will call a function on delete. Into that function, we have to pass corresponding employee ID. Now let's define the function on delete inside the TypeScript file here. On delete with a single parameter ID, it will be of the type number. For delete operation, we have to call this web API method here, delete employee, and the corresponding URI will be this API/employee/ corresponding employee ID that we can pass through the URI itself. So we just need to do this. Back to the service class, I will define one more function, delete employee, with a single parameter ID. It's of the type number. Here we just need to call the delete function from HTTP. HTTP.delete function can be called. Into that we have to pass the URI for the web method. So let me copy this and pasting here. Into this URI, we just need to append this ID here. Same as that of put post function, this delete function also returns an observer. So let's call this function inside the list component here. This dot service dot delete employee function can be called. Into that we will pass the ID of the employee, and here we will subscribe to that returned observable. Inside that we have the callback function with a single parameter response. After successful delete operation, I want to refresh the employee list, so we can call this service function refresh employee list. After that we have to call the toaster notification. So first of all, we have to inject the service inside this component like we have done inside this employee component. So I will copy this private property toaster from here, paste inside this component here. Now let's add the corresponding import statement. For that you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then press period or dot symbol. Now we can call the toaster function like we have done here. Let me copy this and pasting here. Instead of updated, we have deleted successfully message. So here we are using same warning function for delete and update operation. This warning function will apply a background orange. So I want to change this warning function for update. Instead of warning, I will show info. So it will apply the blue background. Since we have a delete operation here, it should be better to do the operation after user confirmation. So I will add this if clause here. Inside that we will call this confirm function, and we will show this message, are you sure to delete this record? If user confirm the operation, we will do this delete operation. Let me save all of these modifications here. I want to delete this employee Fiona Green. So click on this delete button here, and it asks for confirmation. Click on OK. So here we have deleted the corresponding employee record. That's it guys. Here we have implemented CRUD operations insert, update and delete in Web API with latest Angular 7. If you are working with Angular and Web API, I have given the related videos in video description. If you have a video suggestion, please leave that in comment box below. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. And for more awesome videos like this, please subscribe to this channel CodAffection. You can download this project from the GitHub link given below in video description. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day.